What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Josh Coker here from Polymathics, the YouTube channel that helps you become a modern-day Renaissance man. In this video, we're going to talk about the secret that they don't want you to know about writing characters in commercial fiction. That's right. I'm going to tell you today about archetypes, and not just any kind of archetypes. We're going to talk in depth about the modern monomyth archetypes. This is a huge secret they don't want you to know. Before we do, though, I just really quick wanted to say this message is coming to you in part by StoryNinjas.com, stories that pack a punch. And we're actually here today in my home office down in Palm Beach Gardens. I have my coffee cup, and I have some books I want to show you. And I'm just doing a checklist real quick. Yeah, looks like I have everything. So we can get started. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of this, I want to first kind of give you an idea of why I'm doing this video, and I'm super excited about it. And then I want to talk about, give you a little bit of background for those of you that aren't familiar with the subject, so to speak. And then we're going to get into the nitty gritty. But I promise by the end of this video, I'm going to share with you some never before seen information about not just archetypes, but modern monomyth archetypes, things that I don't think anybody has ever seen before, and it's pretty it's mind-blowing. When I came across this, and this was after years of study and analyzing and writing myself, blew my mind. So stay tuned, bear with me. I want to bring everybody up to speed so that everybody's coming from the same page. Now, the first thing we're going to do is a screen share here. So you're going to see the infinity screen for a second. I'm going to pop over here. For those of you that haven't, this is your first time, this here is my home page on YouTube. And as you can see, just got 500 subscribers. That's awesome. I want to thank everybody who has subscribed and has been around since the beginning. Thank you so much for your support. I plan on doing a whole separate video, a thank you video for that. But a couple weeks ago, I did this channel update, kind of giving everybody an idea. And at the end of the channel update, after giving everyone an idea of what I've been up to, what I plan to do, I said, hey, what do you guys want to see from this channel? Because this is an interactive discussion between me and you. And let's just go to this video here. Now, we're not going to watch it. Wow, look at that really handsome, attractive guy there. But one of the comments here came from Dread Electric. He's been a follower for quite some time. And he said, hey, Josh, can we do more on the monomyth archetypes and character development? And it just so happens that with some of the things that I'm working on currently, and some of the things that I have, that questions that have come in, it's a perfect time to talk about archetypes. So now I'm gonna exit out of the infinity. I'm gonna exit out of the screen share. So you're gonna see the infinity screen again, so that I can show you some things that I have right now. Okay, so before we get into discussing archetypes, the first thing I want to do is show you some books that I believe are great. Like they're kind of the foundational conversation. So if you want to dig deeper into this, if you don't believe what I'm saying, or you want to check for yourself, like whatever the case may be, I want to give you the reference materials that I use to come up with these ideas and conversations, so that you know I'm just not like making it up. Okay, the first thing, which I believe is the most, it's the foundation for all of this, for all of the discussions that we have on the monomyth, is this book right here, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. This was written in about the 1950s by a man named Joseph Campbell. Now, I've done a lot of other videos discussing the background and giving information about this. The key thing here is this is the book that it's like the Bible almost of the monomyth. And in this book, Joseph Campbell takes this idea of this, he takes this idea and says, hey, you know, when we look at myths and legends and fairy tales throughout history and rituals and traditions of previous cultures and even modern cultures, we see that there are some very interesting similarities between the way that they told stories. And he essentially he takes all these similarities and he calls it the monomyth. The monomyth is a term that it was actually coined by James Joyce in one of his books, but in Ulysses. But the monomyth, if you break down the word, mono means one, and mythos means story. So it's this connotation of the one story. And essentially it means that, like, throughout time, mankind has had this approach, not a template, so to speak, but an approach to telling stories. And in the book, he goes into a lot of detail about how these are all psychologically based. And that's the reason why they resonate so much with humans. And that's the reason why stories like the ancient epic journey of Gilgamesh, which comes from Babylon, one of our first societies, one of the most ancient stories ever, continues to resonate with people today and continues to follow the same form. It's almost like looking at the Iliad or the Odyssey with Odysseus and Greek characters, because the story approach is so similar and the psychological elements are nearly the same. And we can also see this in storytellers, in modern storytelling as well. And we're going to talk about that. So this book, I would say, is the foundational book. Now, here's the thing. For people who aren't like me and just eat this up, I've been told this can be a very rough read. It's Joseph Campbell he was a professor, and it's a bit academic. Now, I read through this super fast, but that's not been the case with other people. So if you're looking for something a little bit easier to read, I'm gonna put in a huge plug here for my book, Mythological Storytelling. And I mean this. What the purpose of this book was to take all the concepts that Joseph Campbell wrote about and then kind of eliminate the in-depth academic discussions that he would go into and just talk about it from a modern approach. And not only that, but in the book itself, I take a look at modern stories, particularly films, because film is a genre that almost everybody is familiar with. And even within the film genre, I picked stories that I felt were widely known, widely recognized, and also very popular in pop culture. And the reason I did that was so that it would make sense to the most amount of people. So in here, I talk about Star Wars, I talk about Lord of the Rings, I talk about Harry Potter, and I talk about Hunger Games. So, and what we do is we explore all the elements of the monomyth, including archetypes, but particularly the stages of the monomyth in here at a very layman's level. It's very easy to understand, very easy to read, so that you can make sense of some of the things that Joseph is talking about in here, because Professor Campbell, he went into great depth, but he also was using very historical examples, very academic verbiage, okay? So I think those two will really help you understand the monomyth as it pertains to our discussion. There's another book that I have. It's actually over here in my bookcase. I'm not going to grab it right now. I'll show you guys on the screen share. It's called The Writer's Journey. It's by Christopher Vogler. Now, he also takes a modern approach, but he's looking at things primarily from a screenwriter's position. And he he covers a ton of stuff. And I would say that is also one of the foundational books to get your understanding. Now today specifically we're going to talk about archetypes. And because we're going to talk about archetypes, I want to address one book that I found very helpful as I was learning about archetypes. And that is also probably on your bookshelf already. If not, it should be. And that is this book right here, 45 Master Characters by Victoria Lynn Schmidt. And again, when we go back into the screen share, I'm going to go on to Amazon and show you some of these books because she has more. I actually have another book of hers. I can't remember the name of it, but the reason why I'm bringing this book up is because this is a good introduction into archetypes after you've read the other stuff that I've discussed. But the thing about this book is that these are persona-based archetypes, and so that brings up the very first discussion to anybody who's unfamiliar about archetypes. Is that there are different kinds of archetypes. And the best way I can explain an archetype is imagine you're looking at cars, okay? There's all kinds of different makes and models, but when it boils down to it, you have trucks, you have vans, you have SUVs, and you have cars. And there may be some hybrid versions and this and that, but those 4 or 5 different forms, we'll call them, make up the archetype of a vehicle. And each of those archetypes are slightly different in a certain way in the way that they function. And because of that, they serve a different purpose for people. And that's the way we want to look at character. That's the approach we want to take when we're looking at archetypes in a story, okay? Again, there are different kinds of archetypes. There are persona-based archetypes. Now, you might be saying, well, Josh, what's the difference between a monomyth archetype and a persona-based archetype? If you've ever taken a quiz online and it like tells you you're introverted or you're an ANT, I don't know if it's ANTH or INJF, or there are these quizzes online. They're personality quizzes, and when you take them, it's like you're outgoing or you're a leader or you know, you're more of a introverted kind of person. Like those quizzes are essentially giving you your persona-based characteristics. That's what Victoria Lynn Schmidt talks about here, those kind of archetypes. Now, these are very important when creating a character, and these can be very helpful, but I do not believe that these are foundational, okay? A foundational archetype, these are more like the makes and models of a different car, okay? But a car itself is the archetype. A truck is an archetype. And so that's why I'm saying the archetypes from the monomyth are far more important and foundational because they are the psychological elements of a character that reach a person deep within their subconscious. That's why they're so important. They are the things that we identify with almost immediately with the character without us even knowing. And there are reasons for that, and we'll discuss them momentarily, actually. The last book I'm going to talk about, I don't recommend you get it. It's a psychology book. It's a book that I got when I was I got my first degree in English and psychology, and it's called The Personality Puzzle by David Funder. It's a great introduction to psychology, and it's one of the few books that I got in college that I actually kept and think has been helpful. But interestingly enough, in one of the chapters, it goes over psychoanalysis. And the reason why psychoanalysis is so important to, well, psychology in general, I believe is super important to understanding writing. But the reason why it's important to our conversation and the monomyth is because Joseph Campbell, when he wrote this book, he used a lot of his reference material and built his argument with regard to archetypes based on research that was done from the psychoanalytic field. Primarily, the two people he focused on were Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. And so if you're looking to understand like where they came from with archetypes, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, pick up a book on psychology, look something up on YouTube, and you'll get a general understanding. Okay, Joseph Campbell talks about it in his book, where that evolved from, like why. He even talks about the difference between mythological archetypes and dream archetypes, things like that. So now let's go back into our screen share. And again, thank you for bearing with me. I just really want to lay the groundwork for this conversation. Now, the first place that we're going to go to is back to Amazon. I want to show you. Here's where you can get that book. I do believe that for any writer, this is a major book that you should have on your bookshelf. Again, it's called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. The other book that I recommended to you was, you just look up Christopher Vogler. There he is, The Writer's Journey. And here you go. That is the other book that I referenced. This is another great book to have on your bookshelf. It takes a more modern approach. Again, it says it's for writers, and I agree, but he really looks at it from a screenwriter's perspective, somebody who deals with film or TV. And then, of course, well, hold on. Then now let's look up Victoria. Okay, Victoria Lynn Schmidt. She has several books. Let's see. Here's her author page. This is the book. This book I actually did not show you, but this is a really good book that she's written. And it might even be better to pick this one up before the other one that I showed. Oh, this author page isn't done very well. I showed you guys this one, 45 Master Characters and Mythic Models. This is great, but honestly, I think this book right here is really good because it gives you quizzes that you can take for your characters to decide what kind of persona they have. And then based on that, she tells you what characters have been used in other like famous stories and in myth and like how you can shape and mold your character. It's really, really good. Again, though, these are persona-based archetypes. And the last page I'm going to show you here. Poker. We're going to go to my author page just so I can show you. So here's my author page on Amazon. And okay. So this is the one that I recommend you guys get. It's a very quick read, but it condenses all the information that Joseph Campbell and even Christopher Vogler have, and it again, it goes over modern stories. This other book that I wrote here, the Hero's Journey of Odysseus. The reason why I think this is important, if you are interested, is it dissects the Iliad and the Odyssey from the point of the monomyth so that you can identify those stages from a mythological story. And the reason why I chose the Iliad and the Odyssey is because I believe in modern times, the story of Odysseus is probably the most well-known mythological story to a modern audience. So these two almost go hand in hand. If you read this and you see how things have been structured in modern storytelling, and then you read this one, you can kind of like pair them up. Like the same place where Odysseus was in the belly of the whale. You can see where Luke Skywalker was. You can see where Harry Potter was, and you can kind of compare. The third book that I wrote on this topic, How to Write Commercial Fiction That Sells, the three archetypes that we focus on some other things like theme and stuff, but the three archetypes that we focus on are the major ones, which are the hero, the shadow or the villain, and the mentor. And I go into great detail discussing that, which kind of segues me into my next conversation. When I wrote that book, I also created a free course training writing fiction that sells, and all you got to do is click on that. You can sign up for it down here, and you'll receive a free webinar. It's about an hour and a half of me just straight up talking about all that stuff. And then one last plug, and I promise we're going to go through all this, but all of this is related to the archetypes. This course we created on Thinkific. So if you go to story-ninjas, if you go to this link right here, story-ninjas.thinkific.com, you'll see this, thematic resonance. And it's a 7-week drip-fed course that walks you through how to create a theme. It walks you through the stages of the modern monomyth. It walks you through all of that stuff. Okay, I mean, you can see here, and if you want to learn more, like there's all kinds of information. How to create an impactful character arc for your hero. The truth about commercial fiction. Why plotting out your story is the only approach that works, etc., etc., etc. So if that's something you're interested in, I really think it'll help specifically with this information. But so, and again, here's our website, storyninjas.com. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is just because I usually never do, and I'm pretty bad about promoting our stuff. So here's story-ninjas.com, and we're also on Instagram at storyninjas if you want to check us out. Okay, so now that you guys have the background, we've talked about what an archetype is, what the monomyth is. We've talked about some foundational elements of some foundational reference books for storytelling. Now, let me scoot over here and get into some really interesting stuff. This is what I think is going to be the value of this video, which is during my own, and I'm going to increase this screen so that you can see this a little bit better. During my own writing journey, I too look into these things and I consider archetypes. And as you can see, I have this personal archetype builder that I use as a spreadsheet, kind of help me when I'm building stuff. And what I realized about archetypes is that they usually represent something in a family role. Okay, and let me step back here just for a second. This is something I've discussed in other videos, but archetypes usually fall under two different types. Let me see if I can, here we go. You either have a role archetype or a stage archetype, and some of them do cross over. So for example, some classic role archetypes are the hero, the mentor, the ally, the herald, the guardian. That's spelled wrong, I think. Trickster, shapeshifter, shadow. And there are others, but that's a role archetype. That means the role of that character, that's what they do. Then you have a stage archetype. A stage archetype is, depending on where the hero is in their journey, they're going to meet a character that performs these functions. So you have the innocent, the sidekick, the frog, the dragon, the goddess, the temptress, etc., etc. Okay, the foster parent. Just this alone is something that I don't think many writers know or understand. And I'm actually in the middle of writing a book about this. But Let me give you an example of what can happen here. Sometimes the character themselves in the overall story has a role that they will always have. For example, Galadriel will overall always be the goddess in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, any of the anything in that world, the Tolkien world. She always acts as the goddess figure. That's her role. However, sometimes other people might come in that stage and act in the functionary of goddess. For example, in the Fellowship of the Ring, it's actually Lord Elrond of Rivendell who acts as the goddess figure in the goddess stage of the journey. Okay, he is the one that provides healing. He is the one that provides counsel. He provides tools, and he provides an impossible task, essentially. So these are all the primary functions of the goddess during the goddess meeting the goddess stage. So because of that, Elrond, despite him being more of a father figure in his role archetype, takes on the stage archetype of goddess in the Fellowship of the Ring. So that's very important. Now later on, we could look at, like, in the let's see, if we look at, like, in Return of the King, Elrond is the one who provides the sword which was broken to Aragorn right before Aragorn goes on his Atonement with Father stage, which is basically Elrond serving as the positive, I believe it's anima, which is the male counterpart of the Atonement with Father stage. So I hope that kind of helps you understand there's the difference between the role a character takes on in terms of an archetype and the stage. But within those roles, if we go back to where I was before, let me see here. Yes, okay. Those role archetypes are usually part of a family role. And the reason why it's a family role is because the familial unit is the most fundamental unit in a person's psychology. What does that mean? That means that the people who are in our family are the primary actors, especially as we mature and develop in our early years, that help us form our psychology. Okay? So for example, the reason why monomyth archetypes are so important is because they touch on the psychological maturations of an individual that are consistent throughout all people. Meaning, you guys are like, what does this mean? What that means is everybody was born. In order to be a person, you have to have been born. In order to have been born, you have to have had a parent, a mother, and a father. Now, I understand in modern times there are outliers, like people who are orphans or their parents died, but for the most part, generally speaking, broad strokes, everybody has a mother and a father. And even orphans usually have foster parents or they have someone who act in those roles, okay? So, the point of an archetype, for example, the goddess figure or the atonement with father figure, those archetypes are built from that psychological foundation that you were given as a child, okay? And again, Joseph Campbell goes into this. He goes into the psychology of like Freud's teachings and Jung's teachings, but essentially uh, because everyone has had a mother, we all identify with this motherly figure or this divine figure. And the reason why I say divine versus motherly is because, especially in fiction, the divine figure, this archetype, can be represented by both male and female. And I just gave you an example a moment ago where Elrond acts as the divine figure. Okay? So the reason why Joseph Campbell used Meeting with the Goddess is because he was talking about classic mythological stories, which the majority of times, the majority of time in those stories, it was a female character. However, if we look at it from a modern sense, like, that's not always the case. Sometimes the character can be anamorphic, like Yoda. Yoda serves as the goddess figure in the Star Wars series. Or it could be a machine. And I can't really think of one off the top of my head, but the point is, these characters are not gender specific. But the reason why I say they take on a familial role is because whatever that whatever that character is, they're representing something that you encountered or the audience encountered when they were very young and they were maturing. Okay, so the other reason why this is important is because this also helps us set up some world building aspects when it comes to the power of these characters. Now, let me give you a couple examples, and then we'll like look at this. So, for example, the hero is, stereotypically speaking, this individual right here. The hero represents the self. The self is usually someone in, like, coming up on their prime, in the prototypical type of story. If you look at if we take all those characters from all those stories that I mentioned in my book, Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Hunger Games, all of the heroes are in this stage of their life. They're like just coming into their prime, but they're not quite there yet. Okay? So sometimes you have a younger sibling in the story. For example, Prim in Prim, aka Primrose from Hunger Games, who is Katniss's younger sibling. Or sometimes you'll have a child, like even younger than that, like maybe a little baby or a toddler. And I'm going to discuss this in a moment here. Just pause on that. When we look at older siblings, we can look at individuals like Han Solo. He's a perfect example of an older sibling that is someone who, the real difference with an older sibling, they usually serve as the secondary hero or the kingly hero. And this is very interesting because many stories do have two heroes in them. And if they do, they usually are the self hero and the older sibling hero. And I'll show you some examples. In Star Wars, especially in the first one, Han Solo acts as the older sibling in the sense that he has been in the unknown world. He has lived around, like he's evaded the Empire and these shady individuals from Jabba the Hutt's mob and stuff. That, like, he's been around the block. This hero, which would be more of the everyman hero, the unassuming hero, they are not as familiar with this unknown world, the special world, or its rules. And so a lot of times these two pair up and go on the adventure together. The overall story is usually this person's story, and the older sibling ends up helping, but they perform heroic deeds as well. The perfect example of this is Han Solo at the end of Star Wars coming in and basically saving the day and saving Luke by zapping Darth Vader so that Luke can take the shot at the Death Star. But another example of this duo that we've seen in modern storytelling would be if you take a look at Frodo Baggins and Aragorn. Frodo would represent the self-hero, or the everyman hero, or the unassuming hero. And Aragorn represents the older sibling hero, and or the sometimes this is the anti-hero, sometimes this is the kingly hero, and actually that's what Aragorn represents. That we could look at the sister book, which is almost like, if you look at the way Tolkien writes, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are almost the same in many ways. You have Bilbo Baggins, who represents the self-hero, and then you have Thorin Oakenshield representing the older hero. An example of a parent archetype would be, and there are several, would be, I think Obi-Wan and Haymitch are really good examples of this. So here you have, they're both more like uncles than a parent, but the reason why I put parent is because they're the same age as the hero's parents would be. So Obi-Wan is about the same age as Darth Vader, who is actually Luke's father, and Haymitch is right around the age of like an uncle or a parent would be to Katniss. So and this person, the interesting thing about this person is that they are a hero in their own right, whereas the older sibling might be becoming a hero, or they're close to it. The parent figure is usually a hero that's a hero in their own right, or if it's a villain, they're a villain in their own right. Like, they're very well established, and they've already been through the special world. They've established themselves there. And again, just think, like, Haymitch already went to the Hunger Games and won. Okay, Obi-Wan already fought against the Sith, and in the Clone Wars, like, he's established. Vader, on the flip side, like, if you look at it from the villain point of view or the shadow point of view, that archetype, he's a parental figure. He is in charge of, he's like the main lieutenant of the Empire. He's in charge of military vessels and stormtroopers and secret operatives. He's well established in the order. So usually the characters that we see here in the parent or grandparent role are the, what's the word I'm looking for? They're usually the mentor, or they could be the main villain. And villains usually take form of a trickster, a shapeshifter, or a shadow. And there's so many. Like, if we look at the older sibling, a lot of older siblings either take on the hero role, or they might be a shapeshifter, or a trickster, or a shadow. So let's see. Now, if you've established that the villain or the shadow is the parent level of archetype, then usually the grandparent is the mastermind. They're the one who is giving orders and in complete control of the the negative faction, the bad faction. On the flip side, the grandparent for the good guy faction, I guess you could call it, or the heroic faction, is usually someone who the mentor looks to for guidance. So let's take a look at some examples of that. If the parent figure is Darth Vader in Star Wars, then the grandparent figure is Darth Sidious. He is the main mastermind behind the Empire. He serves in the trickster role of a villain, and he is the grandparent version. He's in charge of Darth Vader. He runs the Empire. He calls the shots. So in terms of power, he also has a little bit more power and responsibility and things like that. If we look at it from the flip side, Obi-Wan, who serves in the parental / uncle role, takes orders from Yoda. Okay, so Yoda would be the example of the grandparent in archetype in Star Wars. Interestingly enough, because of the how old characters are in Lord of the Rings, it's a little different. Not by much though. Like Gandalf is super old, and so he's more of a grandparent type character, and he takes orders from a great grandparent type character, which would be Galadriel. And I wouldn't say orders, but he takes counsel from her. So there's that kind of example there. And then, and we'll talk more great grandparents if we think about for these next two right here in this gem. I want to talk about the reason why they're so important. I want to talk about mythological characters, because this doesn't come up in every story. Most of the characters, especially in science fiction and fantasy, are going to focus between somewhere the younger sibling and the great grandparent. Those are the characters that you're mainly going to write about and see. I'm sorry, not the great grandparent, the grandparent. Occasionally you get the great grandparent. Very rarely will you get Cosmos, unless the story is very big, like Lord of the Rings, or like in Marvel, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which we'll discuss in a second here. So when you do, though, they're taking on the very deep mythological ties, and so let's talk about that. Here we have, I've got this thing from Pinterest. It's the Greek mythological family tree, and at the top of the list you have chaos, and then the rest of what are called the primordial deities. These are characters that are so far removed from mortals that they barely ever interact, and they even barely ever interact with the gods, which are the Olympians, or what the mortals consider the gods. All of these characters right here are the gods. But primordial deities, they have enormous power, cosmic power, but they very rarely get involved in any kind of day-to-day events. Then the second layer of gods are what the Greeks called the Titans. Okay, these are sort of again, these are also like they're cosmic entities that are a little bit further down from primordial. Okay, and I know that's kind of hard to explain, but they're not quite. For example, most of the Olympians represent elemental powers: water, lightning, fire. The Titans represent like a little bit larger, like for example the sun, or when we look at primordial deities, Gaia represents the earth. So just to give you like an idea, like there's a little bit bigger of a scope the higher you go or the lower you go. So if we consider this breakout, and then we look at like the archetype builder again, that's this range right here. The Olympians would be somewhere in the grandparent role. Great grandparents would be Titans, and Cosmos would be cosmic primordial deities. Another example of this, got to give my computer a second to load this, would be the Marvel comic hierarchy. They have a very similar one. They have a multiverse force, which according to Marvel, it's the one above all. And then even under that, there's like a little bit of a multiversal breakout. Then the universal force is the one before all, and then he has some breakouts too, like some like children or minions, I guess, the cosmic abstracts, the forces, which anybody who's familiar with the Phoenix, which is about to come out, the Dark Phoenix for X-Men, the Phoenix Force falls under this. Then within the universe, you have gods. And like you can see, there's a ton. There's so many, like we can't even go through all of them. And then way down here, you have mortals. So a more easier pictorial depiction of this, we just wait a second for this to come up. Come on. Okay, so this is coming from a comic book. It's a really good depiction. You have, here's Thanos, and he's like, you know, on one of his various missions to take over the universe and all the gemstones and the Infinity Wars. And he's he's kind of looking at it and trying to figure out where he would fall within the pantheon of cosmic and primordial gods. And what you have here, you see the living tribunal, which is like the primordial representation of the multiverse in a character form. And then down here, so you have him way up at top. If we look at this thing, he's way up over here somewhere. Yeah, the living tribunal. And then down here, you have more of like the Titan type gods. You have like Odin, you have Galactus, and Thanos actually would probably lie somewhere around here. Now, why am I explaining all this? What does this have to do with archetypes? If you understand this, then you can take a look at, let me hide this for a second. You can take a look at a chart like this, and you can start to very easily do some world building because you understand the power differences between these familial roles. So the child is usually going to have a much lesser ability than a grandparent, okay, in real life and life. So if we take time bending, time travel, time teleportation, whatever you want to call it, and we put it into some sort of power order, it would go something like this. A speedster is someone who can't necessarily bend time, but they have the power to distort it in some ways. And then, so think of the Flash, right? When the Flash or Quicksilver runs super fast, like they're not bending time, but they can manipulate events that most mortals cannot. And then the ultimate power of theirs leads to teleportation. If you again, if you're familiar with like the Flash, there's this whole multiverse aspect, and like I forget what it's called, but it's like Flash screws up the time continuum because he teleports back in time and forward in time, and he like changes events. So speedsters, the next level would be teleportation. Then the next level would be, and actually this teleportation part, pardon me, I kind of skipped. This teleportation is actually teleporting just to different spots. Like you're so fast, you can teleport to a different place in time and space. Well, actually, usually it's just space. So you could teleport from your room to the kitchen, not even by running anymore. It's almost like by thinking. And an example of this would be like Nightcrawler. Then you have a forwarder who can go forward in time, but they can't go backwards in time. And if you think about it, going backwards in time is a little bit more powerful because you can change events if you go backwards in time. If you go forward in time, you can't really change events. So of course, from forwarder, you go to a rewinder, someone who can go back in time. Then the next level would be a pocketer, someone who has the ability to go back and forth in time and stop time and live inside of a pocket of time. So if we think of Hiro Nakamura from the TV series Heroes, he has this power, and it's very interesting. He can pause time, walk around, do things, and essentially he could live there if he wanted to for his whole life. And I believe there are stories that have characters that do such things. Then you have a grandparent who can create portals in time, but their power only allows them to do it within like the planet that they're on. Then the next stage of that would be galactic time portals. So people who can go not just places within their planet, but places within the galaxy using portals. And then and then you have the master of time and space, which is someone who can essentially go anywhere within the cosmos or the multiverse. And so this is just an example of how you can do this. And and then one thing that I didn't talk about was the gem keeper. And the gem, again, think about the Infinity Stones from Marvel. It doesn't have to be a gem, but in many stories, there is some sort of physical manifestation of a cosmic power. And this physical manifestation, sometimes it has its own personality, but it bestows cosmic powers on the user. So think of Excalibur from the Legend of King Arthur, or if anybody's familiar with the anime series Bleach, those swords have cosmic powers that they kind of bestow more power upon the users, the Soul Reapers. That is what the gem multiversal power is. And keep in mind that cosmos and gem powers, when we consider them, they're not just going upwards and outwards into the universe, but they're also going downwards into the quantum level. So think about like Ant-Man and how he in the first Ant-Man movie, he enters the subatomic level. That is a cosmic multiversal type power. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. It gives you some insight into how powers can interact with archetypes and the familial roles that archetypes take. And then I'll give you guys a little bit of a glimpse into some later discussions. Here, I mean, I've gone through a whole bunch of different things. Their ranks, powers, dark archetypes, destinations, vehicles, all these things. So I don't want to show too much because I know this video's got a ton of information. If you guys see this right now and you say, Josh, where can I get this? Can you post this somewhere? Let me know, drop a comment, and I'll put it on the Story Ninjas website under like the free stuff. I'll try to put it somewhere here under the course material. I'll put it under free or something. But let me know, because I use these things. They're not always fleshed out all the way because they're works in progress. But if you think they'll help, let me know. There's other stuff in here too. Like I showed, you have the classic archetypes. I've been working on this thing for alignments. And so these persona archetypes are based off of that book I told you about with from Victoria Lynn Schmidt. But I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to tell you guys about today about archetypes. Just thinking. Oh, yeah, I guess there was one other thing I told you I would tell you about it. Where is it here? Yeah. There is one thing you have to keep in mind. Just because an archetype is not how can I say this? Just because the prototypical story follows this kind of familiar structure, where usually the hero is in this age range and the older hero is in this age range, and then you have like the mentor around here. That's prototypical. That's what we see in most stories, but that is not always the case. Let me move this so it's not distracting. And I'll give you a good example. Sometimes your target audience may not be someone who's entering their prime. Sometimes your target audience might be a grandparent or a great-grandparent. A perfect example of this would be the movie Up, which I believe Pixar made. And in that movie, the hero is like a grandparent, great-grandparent age, His name is Mr. Gustafson. And his primary flaw that he has to overcome is that he's become so jaded with the world, he's kind of lost his sense of adventure. And in that event, the person who ends up serving as his mentor is actually someone who's in the younger sibling range, and it's a kid called Russ, who's like a Boy Scout. They call him something else, some like adventurers or something like that, but he's like a little Boy Scout who has this enormous amount of like sense of adventure, almost to a detriment. And through that, through the journey, Mr. Gustafson is able to reignite his sense of adventure and essentially his childhood, and he comes back to life, which is a huge lesson for someone in this age range. So that brings up another key point about archetypes. When you're developing your story, you have to consider who is your target audience. If you're creating a story for older people, like that story, and granted, that was a family story and it was good for a lot, but the target audience really was people in this age range. And because they did such a great job with the story, families from all over came to see it because the characters were so rich, and it was kind of something that hadn't really been done that often before. Another movie that's kind of like that, I don't remember it too well, it's called Space Cowboys. It's got like Clint Eastwood and a couple older fellows in it. It's geared towards an older audience. And so the way you demonstrate your characters is a little different. My point is that when you're, and let me stop here before I make that point. The reason why we normally see heroes in this age range just before their prime or just like in their prime is because that is usually the age range of people who are making the most money, who can pay for an entertainment, whether it's a book, a video game, a TV, a movie, and they're because they work, they're usually the ones that want to be entertained the most because you know, kids don't really have money to buy their own stuff, and older people, because they're say retired or whatever, they're not as stressed out. So most entertainment type vehicles are geared towards these individuals here in these age brackets because they're the ones who are most likely going to buy and use the story. The other reason, mythologically speaking, is because these age ranges are where people are just entering into adulthood, and they need some sort of ritual to initiate them into adulthood. Mythologically speaking, historically speaking, Joseph Campbell would say that's the reason why myth is so important, is to teach individuals who are adolescents going into adulthood how to behave in society. So that, again though, you can create a story at any of these levels for your target audience. The thing to keep in mind is if you do have someone who's a grandparent, it's unlikely that they're going to go to their their parent, because their parent's probably dead, right? In a modern, like, it's more likely that they're going to be educated by someone in the younger population about something that maybe they've forgotten or they're jaded about. Another example of this, I told you we would get back to this, is that if you, I don't know if you have, any of you 80s kids might remember this, but there's this Tom Cruise movie called Legend. It's like one of the only fantasy movies he was ever in. And he's like this elf. And in it, he has to go save his girlfriend. But his mentor is actually this sprite that comes in the form of like this really young child. And he's also helped by like these dwarves and stuff. But in many fairy tales, we see this where a young child acts as the mentor. And in some religions, like Hindu religion, normally that is like the key stereotypical mentor figure is a young child. And it's not necessarily because of their youth or anything like that. It's just that is the figure that that religion kind of became accustomed to for whatever reason. The point that I've been trying to make with all this is, just because we have these prototypical story tropes that we're used to seeing, where the old wise man or the old crone is the mentor, that's not always the case. And sometimes it's cool, and it's a twist, and it's refreshing for the audience to see something different, like a child. Or in many traditions, the shaman, in many cultures around the world, especially historically speaking, the shaman was this person who had essentially gone crazy, but they had come back from, and in their madness, they found lessons about the world that nobody else has seen. If you've ever watched the movie Tudors, there's this really interesting couple episodes towards the end of the last season where King Henry has this court jester who talks to King Henry like nobody else would. King Henry kills like everybody, but this court jester, he makes fun of King Henry. He belittles him. He tells him how he's messed up with his life. And the reason why King Henry allows this is because the dude is just mad. He's just crazy. But for some reason, King Henry looks at him for advice, because those characters, those shamanistic characters who have kind of seen the other world, the madness of the world, they represent like the fact that the world does not make sense sometimes. And so this is why a character like the Joker in DC Comics makes such a great villain. It's because he's so crazy that it almost does make sense that he's like that, because the world sometimes does not make sense. And you know, I could go on and on about all these things, and we'll do future videos. This video is super long. Hopefully it has tons of information. I felt like this was some of the most groundbreaking information I've ever come across. I actually plan on writing about it in some of my archetype books that I've been working on. So that will wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen. One more time, let me just show you guys. If you want to learn more about us, check us out at our website, www.storyninjas.com, story-ninjas.com, or you can check us out on, let's see, Instagram. Let's see. I'll show you guys our Insta. We're just building it up. Hopefully it goes on. Oh, what kind of weird damn. Okay. Oh, I'm not logged in. Anyways, oh yeah, we'll continue as me. That's fine. So here's my Instagram. You guys can check me out at Joshmas Prime. But you can also, here, yeah, at Joshmas Prime, or you can look up Story Ninjas. And there we are. You can even see our logo there. Bam, Story Ninjas. We just started out, and we'll be building this up periodically. So that's us. If you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. If you think that this will help someone else, then please go ahead and share this with other people that you think this might help. Spread the good word. Let other writers know what's going on. And if you have any questions, or if you feel like I missed something, or whatever the case may be, drop a comment below. If there's a video that you want me to go into more depth about one of these topics or something different, let me know. I'm always open to suggestion. I love it when you guys ask questions because then I can make videos like this and address it. And that reminds me, so Dread Electric, wherever you are out there in the interverse, thanks for asking this question. I think it's helped provide a lot of information for everybody, and I loved doing this video. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to go to the pool and relax. But until next time, take it easy.